Hi everybody, my name is Carrie and this is Tiger Lily Designs. Thanks so much for coming by. Today we're going to be working in Scrappy September, which means every week this month I'm going to be releasing a video on Wednesday, giving you guys a new project of how to use up those scraps you've got. If you're a quilter like I am, or dabble in the textile arts, and you've got all the fabric, you've got some scraps. And so I've got some fun projects lined up to show you what you can do with those scraps, get done in an afternoon, and feel real excited about it. So today we're going to be working with our smaller scraps. We're going to start off small. I don't know how let's talk about what you do to manage your scraps. So I used to be a throw all my scraps in one of those big giant plastic bins underneath my sewing table type of girl. That got a little overwhelming, to be honest with you. It was one of those things where I was not trying to dive into the scrap bin, was something that I hated doing because it would take hours to sort and try to figure out what I wanted and dig down to the bottom to find what I was looking for. And to be honest, that just meant I wasn't doing it. So instead, a couple of years ago, I can't remember exactly where I heard it, where I read it, who knows. I decided rather than just having a huge, ginormous bucket that I ignored in the corner of my room, I would try to manage the scraps as I work through a project. So what does that mean? So what I do now is as I work through a quilt, as I work through any kind of fabric project, when I'm done, I take those scraps and I cut them into sizes, common sizes that I use. This is my most popular size that I cut them into. It's 2.5 inch squares. Everybody knows what a 2.5 inch square is. Easy peasy. But then what I do is I organize them by rainbow color in these cute little Target bins that I got. And so that way, when I want to go and use them, all my pinks are in a stack right here. So yummy. So I cut my scraps into common used sizes. 2.5 is my most popular. Then I go up to 3, 3.5, and then I go all the way up to a 5. And then I just use, so that way my stacks are my scraps are organized in a way I can use them. The last size that I cut into is width of fabric. Sometimes you end up with the width of fabric and you don't want to cut that into, that's good stuff too. So I do have width of fabric straight line strips, whether it's 1 inch, 2 inch. I usually don't go any wider than a 2.5 inch, like a jelly roll width. I have a project later on in the month that we're going to be using the width of fabric scraps for. But today we're going to be working on 2.5 inch scrap projects. If you saw, obviously the video teaser picture showed you what we're going to be doing, but let me show you here. We're going to be working on what I'm going to call a fruit bowl quilt. Now, it doesn't have to be a quilt. It could be a project bag. But the point is it's a fruit bowl. It's an assortment of 10 different fruits that I have graphed out for you guys that you can either make into a fruit bowl quilt, or you can make an individual project bag, or you could make a little table runner with 3 or 4 of the fruits on there, whatever your heart desires. So what I've got, as I said, is I took some graph paper and in my handy dandy colored pencils, and sat down here at my design table and I gridded out 10 fruits. When you're working with 2.5 inch squares, it's a grid pattern. It's not that hard. You just do it. So I sat there and I played and I drew and I had fun, and I ended up with 10 fruits: oranges, apples, lemons, limes, pumpkins, tomato, pear, pineapple, strawberry. That's what we've got. And so what I've got is, so you don't have to screenshot this little graphic, don't worry. I went ahead and I uploaded this to my website. It's a free document. It's a free PDF download. The link to my website is in the comments below. All you do is you go in there and you get the free PDF, and you'll be able to print out my little tutorial graphing paper color fun that I use to make my fruit bowl quilt. fruit bowl quilt blocks. So I had a lot of fun with that. And so once I did that, I started to put some together. Obviously, you can see I went ahead and I took the strawberry all the way down. I mean, it is a done, finished, it actually has a project in it, project stitching bag. I've got the pineapple sewn all up. And then I've got the pumpkin at a different stage. So today I'm going to do with you guys to show you some of the tips and tricks that I use, because this is not rocket science. Listen, I know sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, 2.5-inch squares, that's a lot of points to match up. I mean, do you see all those points? And if you don't match them up, it could take you hours to try to sew straight lines and get all those points, those corners, 1, 2, 3, 4 to match up perfectly right there. You don't have to worry about it. So I've got lots of tips and tricks. I'm going to show you guys how to have perfect points on the whole thing. It's sewing 2.5 blocks for dummies. You can do it, I promise. So let me go ahead and switch the camera angle and get down to the design table and show you what we're going to be doing. Okay, everybody, I've got you turned around. Today we're going to be working on, I'm going to show you how I make the watermelon block. I drew this one, super cute. I know summer's almost over. I'm trying to hold on to it as long as I can. So we're going to put this one together. Okay, so the first tip that I wanted to show you is this. Okay, so what this is a piece of foam board. When you're working with 2.5-inch blocks, to be able to line them all up in the tricky way that we're going to be doing it, you can either buy the interfacing that's pre-gridded. And those are gridded, I think at either 2, 2.5, I don't know, I don't buy it. So what I do is I do my own grid that's going to be underneath my interfacing. So I took a dollar store foam board and I took my handy dandy Sharpie and my ruler, and I went ahead and I drew a grid on this to be my cheat for underneath my interfacing. And you'll understand what I mean when I get into it. Okay, so the next thing you're going to need, let me show you. I have a lot of this, but this is the interfacing I use. I use Pellon, what's it called? 911 fusible featherweight. It's light enough where it's going to be easy to sew through and it's not going to add a lot of bulk, but it's the fusible that's the key. You definitely want the fusible, one-sided fusible, lightweight interfacing. You can get whatever you want, but that's the one I use a lot. So now I've got my interfacing and I put it on top of my grid and so I can see the grid underneath. Obviously I've got the sticky fusible part up top. So now I'm ready to go. So I'm going to look at my grid and I'm going to see that it's a 4x6 on my little cheat sheet. So I'm just going to start. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start pulling my scraps. Like I said, you just have to have your scraps ready to go. You know, so I like to mix and match some of my funky ones. I don't want them all to be the same. You know, that it's kind of a patchwork. And so all I'm doing, I'm using my grid as my cheat as to know where to place my blocks. And then I'm just placing them, right? So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 solid pink. I need another row of solid pink. I got a lot of scraps. So I'm hoping, and I'm pretty sure that I will be able to, each of my blocks is going to be just a different scrappy pink, just to add some little fun to it. You know, I could mix and match the different tones. If I wanted to bring a brighter one in, kind of, you know, this is where the fun gets in. You can mix and match and move around, but you're on your grid. And so it makes it really easy for you guys to work through. Okay, so the tones of that are too close to each other. And I like that a little better. I don't like the same bright tones right next to each other. I like to space them out a little bit. So now I've got that. And so, oh, I need 2 more solid pinks down below. Let's see if I have any that are in the same tonal family that I haven't used. I might have used them all up, but that's okay. You know, I can have a couple of the same. Oh, here's one I haven't used yet. That's fun. And, oh, another one I haven't used. All right, so let's, perfect. All right, so I spread them out. I've got them all the way I like it. This one's got a little fold on it. That's okay. Okay, so now I've got my solid pinks. And so this is where it gets a little, doesn't get tricky. But what you're going to have to do for this next part where it's a pink and green, you're going to have to create a half square. I've already done it. You can see what I did here. And so how did I do this? That's real simple. So I'm going to take a bigger square because obviously I'm going to cut it. I'm going to want to cut it down to 2.5 inch square. I can't make this with 2.5 inch scraps. I have to make it with bigger scraps. So I went into my 3 inch scrap bin and made some. I sewed them together. You know, it's one of those things you put two on top of each other. You sew right down the line, open it up. So I did want to go ahead and show you guys. I know that I described to you how you do these intersecting half pink, half green blocks. But you know what? I decided I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to do it just because that's the whole point of a tutorial. Let me show you. So I went ahead and I grabbed a red and a green. I'm going to make a tomato block later on this week. So I'm going to need a couple of these, half red, half green. So these are bigger than my 2.5. These are 3 inch scrap squares that I go ahead and I put together. You can mark a center line if you want to. I don't. I go ahead and just line up the point with my 1/4 inch foot. So one side, flip it around, and then I'm going to line up the other side with the 1/4 inch point. Cut it. And so if I had, okay, so if I had drawn a line, I would have been sewing a 1/4 inch on either side of the line. Because what I'm going to do now, oh, maybe you can see better the threads on this side. Ooh, tension's a little wonky. You can see a 1/4 inch on either side. So it's about a 1/2 inch gap between the two. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut right in the middle. And now I've got these 2 squares ready to go. I'm going to iron them up. So you can see, this is the other one. I've already trimmed this one. So this was, it makes 2. Every time you do it, it makes 2. And now I just need to trim it down. This one I've already trimmed. And this is the one that was just raw from when I went and sewed it across. Okay, so what's another trick? It's all about the tools. I'll be honest with you. The block lock ruler is a lifesaver. This is what you're going to want to use to trim your blocks because it locks right in on your seam. And that way you can get your perfect point on either side. I have a 4.5 inch square one. You can get them different sizes. I kind of just use my design table to help me cut and create those perfect 2.5 inch squares. Now they're lined up 1/2 and 1/2. Okay, so there's one. Let me follow my little chart to make sure I'm not missing. And there's one. All right, and then now I'm going to start creating the rind. No problem. All right, I do need to go and cut this one. So I will do that. And so now I just need some solid greens. So I'm going to go into my my scrap bin and grab some of the solid greens that I have. I'm using the chartreuse green family today. You can stick with tones, do whatever, you know, whatever scraps you have, whatever you like is perfect. So I don't have quite as many greens as I do pinks. Shockingly, pinks are more popular in my quilty world. So I'm going to have to double up a few times, and that's okay. So that one is where my other, this is where this is going to go once I cut it down. Actually, I'm going to put this one here so they're not in the exact same spot. So that one's going to go there when I cut it down. All right, so I've almost got my puzzle together. So you can see I'm just covering up those squares. It's kind of like a puzzle, coloring in the lines with fabric. I mean, really, it's easy peasy. So then I've got 2 empty squares right here. I have to finish the rectangle. So I've got just 2.5-inch white blocks that are going to fill right there. All right, so once I cut this down, I can't do it with you guys. Actually, let's see if I can squeeze right here and get it done. Grab my handy dandy rotary cutter. And so I'm going to lock this boy in place and cut the edges. All right. And then you either flip the ruler or you can move the fabric. Either one works. Neither is right or wrong. Just different ways of using the ruler. And it was just that easy. So now it's cut and it's the perfect size. It fits right in the puzzle. So I've got my watermelon rind ready to go. Okay, so now what? All right, so what we're going to do next, before we go over to the ironing board, is we're going to cut the extra. You don't have to go all the way to the fabric, but you want to have minimal fusible exposed interfacing before you go to the next step. It just works out better that way. All right. So I've got this watermelon block. You can see the puzzle's all set up. The squares are perfectly lined up thanks to my grid. Now we're going to take it over to the ironing table and I'm going to show you what's next. All right, like I said, I brought everything over. I've got the puzzle, everything's lined up. Let me just make sure nothing shifted while I carried over from the design table to the ironing board. Everything looks good. You don't need your squares to be exactly perfectly lined up. That's the beauty of this method. The points are going to correct themselves in the sewing. So as long as you're in the neighborhood of where they should be, you are good to go. Okay, again, you're going to use a pressing cloth. My daughter's 16, so I don't need Elsa fabric anymore, sadly enough. So what I use, this is one of my pressing cloths. Now remember, the fusing sticky side is up. That's what we use when we are putting the pieces down. We want the glue side of the interfacing facing up towards us. So that means this little edge of exposed sticky interfacing is going to actually stick to your pressing cloth. So it's important that your pressing cloth is not important to you. I have a specific, I use this pressing cloth only for this purpose. So I'm going to take my iron. You don't have to use steam. I like steam. I think it creates the interfacing just seems to stick super fast, engages the interfacing real quick when you're doing it. You don't have to press it for too long. It probably didn't even need to be that long. So then you can see, like, it was sticking to the pressing cloth. The interfacing, the fusing was doing what it was supposed to do, but that's okay. We peel it right off. And now we've got our watermelon piece all stitched up. The pieces don't come off. Now it's time to sew. Okay, now we're at my sewing machine. I'm going to be using my Juki TL 2010Q today to stitch this up. If you're not familiar with this machine, I did an unboxing a couple weeks ago. It is a workhorse, and so far I'm loving everything about it. But let me show you what we're going to be doing now. So as you can see, we brought this over from the ironing board. I mean, you can see I'm not perfectly lined up. There's a little bit of, 1/16 of an inch space between some of the squares. Don't worry, it's going to be great. So the first thing we're going to do is fold right on this line. That's it. Easy peasy. So you got your 1/4 inch foot on your machine, however you use your machine. You're going to line up the edge of this fold with your 1/4 inch foot. Back stitch. And sew. I use my presser foot cutting. So, see how it lined up those? Just wait. So then you're going to do it again. You're going to do it all 4 times. So this is a 4x6, remember? So we're doing the 4. I always like to do the longer sides first. I don't think it really matters. That's what seemed to work for me. So I stitch up real quick, just along the fold. Use my presser foot cutting mechanism on the machine. Makes it easy peasy. All right, I'm back from the ironing board. You can see everything is super straight. Now I'm going to do the exact same stitching just on the short sides. Okay, so I gave it a quick press, and as you can see, the watermelon block is almost ready. So the only thing I'm going to do, because what I'm going to be doing with my watermelon block is I'm going to make myself a watermelon project bag. So what I want to do is I want to add some 2 inches. I've got some 2-inch white strips cut that I'm going to frame the block in. And then I'm going to use my handy dandy project bag tutorial. I don't have one up on YouTube yet. It's coming, but I'm going to make myself a project bag just like this with my featured watermelon block in there. Put it together, and I'll come back and show you guys the finished product. Video magic. I'm done sewing the watermelon block. Like I said, I went ahead and I sewed some white solid strips around the whole block. Used a pink chunky zipper. I like the chunky ones, so it's easier to do. Some black and white stripe binding, and she's finished. You can see using that technique, your points are all, I'm not going to say perfect, but pretty darn close. My project bags, I use quilt batting on the inside. Both the front and the back layers have quilt batting. This one measures 11 by 13, so it's the perfect size for your cross-stitching projects or EPP or any kind of hand stitching that you want to take along. So while I was doing that, I also went ahead and put together the pumpkin block that I had started and shown you guys in the beginning of the video. I used some fun Allison Glass fabric vintage on the back of that. So that way, when I have to let go of the summer and the watermelon, I am ready to transition to my pumpkin fall. And of course, the original, the OG that started it all, my strawberry one. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I had a lot of fun pulling out my colored pencils and sketching and coming up with these 10 fruit designs using a simple graph paper and coming up with the different fruits, and hopefully you can use them either to make a fruit quilt block, a table runner, a project bag, so many options to use at those 2.5-inch square blocks, scrappy blocks that you have. I hope you join me for the rest of Scrappy September. I'm super excited about some of the projects I have planned for this month. One each week, a new one coming out every Wednesday. 2.5-inch blocks was this week's tutorial. Next week is also a 2.5-inch block. So make sure you cut a bunch of those. Totally different concept. We're not making project bags. We're making something totally different. Using, again, though, the 2.5-inch blocks, scrappy fabrics that you have in your stash. If you do make something, I would love for you to tag me in your video, Tiger Lily Scrappy, SAL, so long. So Tiger Lily Scrappy, SAL. I went ahead and put a link down below so you can see the hashtag, but I would love for you to tag me on Instagram so I can see all the things that you make. I appreciate you guys coming by. I appreciate your comments. Thank you so much for your support. Again, the designs are available on my website for free. You just go on there, click the link is down below in the description box, and you can go and download the PDF that will give you the graph paper sketches that I did for these 10 fruit blocks. Nothing hard. You could do it yourself, but I kind of did all the sketching work for the 10 different fruits. I would love to see what you guys do. I hope you guys have fun. Thanks so much for coming by.